You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The PWHL season is about to get underway, and great timing because we have Erica El Ayala here with our bi-weekly Women's Hockey Spotlight. And Erica, let's start with the rosters. We are set and ready to go for the second season of the PWHL.
Yes, we are. We know that the puck will drop, as you mentioned, this week, tomorrow, actually, and the rosters have been submitted. Now we're starting to get them slowly. So we have the Ottawa roster and the New York Sirens roster, which we'll circle back to a little bit later, Rachel. But let's start with Ottawa since they were the first team. They get the gold star for placing their roster up first. But as they're looking to round out, this year and, maybe get a little bit higher and closer to a playoff spot, what stands out to you from this Ottawa team?
Because they missed the playoffs last year, obviously they wanted to, improve things. They did lose Daryl Watts off their roster this year, but gained Danielle Cernacki. And I think she is a really good addition to this roster. Plus, with some of their core returnees like Shan Darkangelo, Brianne Jenner, I do think that, Savannah Harmon on the blue line, who's my favorite defender in women's hockey. So they have a lot of really strong players here. It's just a matter of, can they put it together more consistently?
Yeah, for sure. I also like that they have some of the Czechia players. Rachel, I love Team Czechia. I think that they play a really great game at the international level. So to see Katarzyna Mrazova as well as Teresa Vanishova on that roster, Natalie Snodgrass also is kind of a really interesting pick there. But those are all also returners to this team. Interesting, though, because this Ottawa team, they couldn't find a place for Michaela Grant-Mentis, who just continues to thrive, with Montreal alongside one of the greatest to ever do it in Marie-Philippe Poulin. So we don't have that full Montreal roster. I know a lot of people wondering if and when we'll see the great Julian Dempsey. But we'll have to see as these rosters fill out. Now with the Sirens, there was a little bit of trying to figure out if they were going to be able to land their big fish, but they were able to do that, Rachel. And I think that this team is going to be interesting to see what kind of leadership comes, because they struggled as well. But I think that they're hoping that they can really settle things this year, and their number one draft pick is a huge part of that.
Right. Sarah Fillier and getting her signed was a big deal. It took a little while, but they finally got there. New York was the last place team from last year. They opened their season against the defending champs. So that is a real big challenge for them. They have a new coach in Greg Fargo. They have a new arena in the Prudential Center in New Jersey. And so I think there was a lot of disconnect and lack of chemistry on this team last season. And that is going to be the key, is can the new coach really get them to play as a unit?
Yeah, for sure. And, just taking a look now the rosters are starting to pour in, of course, as we said that. But, I love to see that Chloe Aurard and Jade Downey Landry are back on this team. We mentioned Fillier, Elizabeth Giguère. I think even during the PHF years is an interesting player, a lot of talent, but I think that sometimes the environment, Gil, almost has to be right. And those players always intrigue me because, again, you want to be able to unearth that talent, but you also want to be able to have people fit into a system.
Yeah, it's always sort of walking that delicate line. And some of those players, if you can maximize the talent into production, they can be really useful. But if you can't, it can be a real problem in the locker room and things can drift apart.
Yeah, for sure. So looking to see what happens there. I mean, I love to see that Abby Levy and Corrine Schroeder both on this roster. I think that they showed that they're a great goalie tandem. They add Kaylee Osborne as well there. And then of course there is Zandy Hart, who was the captain last year, but was injured, Rachel. And I
Yep.
would imagine that, the Sirens are really hoping to have a healthy leadership core with Zandy Hart at the lead right there.
Yeah, and that should help with cohesiveness defensively on that team.
Yeah, for sure. We again the rosters are literally coming in as we are recording here. But we also have the Boston roster. I think this is going to be an interesting team because they were able to get to the final, just couldn't get over the hump that is Minnesota. But I think that, a lot of people looking at Hillary Knight, we've alluded to it. There was a rivalry series stop in Hillary Knight's hometown. Are we thinking this could be the last run? Also, what do we need to see from Hillary Knight? Because, we were pretty critical of her early on.
Yeah, Boston, I think, even though they just squeaked into the playoffs, right? And then made
Yeah.
it to the final. But they had a lot of trouble scoring, especially early in their season. And they've been kind of that veteran team, right? Built around Hillary Knight. And I think like this is the year that more of the younger players are going to have to be a big part of it. Hannah Bilka, I think, is going to be a huge part of that. And hopefully she can help drive play on this team.
Yeah, for sure. And another team I want to talk about is Toronto. Now, this Gill was a team that they took a little while to hop out of the gate, and then they really surged under, again, Natalie Spooner. We talked about her. She was not ready for camp. But when you have a team that was able to literally pick their opponent, but then they don't get out of the first round, I mean, that's kind of brutal. And I can tell you for sure, we spoke to a few of these players in the offseason, and there's definitely a chip on their shoulder.
There has to be. There has to be. When you pick your opponent, when you call out another team and say, we can beat you, and then you don't follow it up, that's got to leave a bad taste in everybody's mouth.
Yeah, for sure. So, Spooner is going to be someone who they'll hope to get back here. But you mentioned that there were some players, Rachel, for the Ottawa team that will not be returning. But Daryl Watts actually is on this Toronto team.
Yep.
We also know that Emma Woods from New York is on this team. So it's a little bit of a reuniting of some of those players from the Toronto Six who ended up winning what was the last ever Isabel Cup.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that Toronto has a mission this year because of that chip on their shoulders. And I think they've put together a roster that should, in theory, be better than the one they had last year. It's just a matter of can they put it together.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's also going to be interesting to see what we get in net. Kristen Campbell, Soupy as she's known, and CJ Jackson return to
You always love CJ.
always love CJ. But again, they have two players starting on LTIR that are on their roster. Spooner, as we mentioned, and then also Megan Carter. Both of those injuries were listed before. So again, the roster's just coming in. So we're not going to go through all of them. Those are the ones that we were able to see for sure. But check out the PWHL website because all of the rosters are in now or will be posted soon. But that leads us to talk about something else here. And it's like, how can you watch these games? And the answer, Rachel, is if you're in Canada, you can't watch on YouTube.
No, and it's not even officially out there as of this recording. It's just sort of been anecdotally confirmed by some media outlets and reporters. And
Right.
the fact that they have not announced a specific US broadcast
Yeah.
plan either. They have officially announced the Boston Fleet one. Maybe they're announcing the New York Sirens one as we're recording this with all the rosters. But, Nesson will carry the Fleet games, MSG will carry the Sirens games. Our understanding is that all the other games, US games, will be on YouTube in the US, but available nowhere else in the world on YouTube. We know there's a foreign broadcast in Czechia
Czechia.
already already arranged, and I'm not sure about the rest of Europe, but it's been a little haphazard, I gotta say, in terms of this, where can you watch, which is so important, right? Even if you want to like set DVRs to record, like I just want to record all the Sirens games. And it's even small things like if you want to search for the PWHL in like um Fubo, you have to search for Professional Women's Hockey League all written out. You can't search for PWHL. So
That's a lot of
it's
letters.
like the little things, right, that we just
Yeah.
don't know. And I think it's important for the league to get out in a cohesive format.
I would agree with that. Unfortunately, Rachel, what you're talking about is not foreign to sports and certainly not foreign to hockey. I'm not saying it's right, but it's just one of those headaches that I think, Gil, seems a little bit harder for especially teams to figure out. I host Locked on Kraken, and Seattle was with the Mariners broadcast Root Sports and then switched to an in-house. And now that has made it more difficult for me as someone who's not in Seattle to watch the games. So I listen a lot on radio, which I'm glad we have, but that's not even an option right now for women's hockey fans. Radio, that is.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to grow the game, you have to make it as easy as possible for people who are interested in finding those games to be able to watch them. And, that audience is there, but if they get discouraged, that really doesn't bode well in the long term.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say that these broadcasts, the quality is the best I've ever seen. And I'm gonna be honest, at least for me, Rachel, I'm including what we sometimes see at the international level, certainly for the rivalry
Yep.
series and even at the Olympics, which is wild. We want all of the angles. Give us all of the angles. We want it all. But finally, Rachel and I are kind of twinning it up here with our New York Riveters throwback.
Unplanned, I swear.
Unplanned. But we got some throwback gear, and that is because we are tossing up stick taps to the captain, not the original captain of the Riveters. That goes to Ashley Stretch Johnston, but the captain of the New York Riveters, who then came over to PWHL New York, now the Sirens. Madison Packer announced her retirement. It seems like, Rachel, and we've talked about this, it seemed like it was going to be an uphill climb for Madison Packer to be able to make an impact on this Sirens roster. And unfortunately, instead of maybe trying to look for another team, Madison Packer has decided to hang up the skates. We know she's got 2 young children and lives in the tri-state area. So to go elsewhere would have been difficult. And she's been outspoken even on right here on Locked on NHL about that was important to be able to stay close to home. So I mean, Madison Packer, what can you say? Definitely a personality, take that as you will, but also someone who has definitely impacted women's hockey and has helped grow the game.
Sure. She's been an incredible ambassador for women's pro hockey, always willing to put herself out there and go the extra mile in the community and in the media to help this game. Played in the NWHL/PHF for 8 full seasons with the New York team. And I think developed a reputation as like a physical player, but with some skill too. And I think like that's really for me her legacy, coming from Wisconsin into this new pro league and just making such a huge impact. And I think like when you think about like the earlier years of women's pro hockey and people saying, "Oh, but you can't check." Madison Packer like made she found a way. let's be
Define
clear.
check, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, something that's not allowed doesn't mean that it's not present.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, we are wishing Packer the best, she and her family, who she thanked. However, it is likely not the last that we have heard of Madison Packer. You mentioned that she has
I hope not.
you entered into the media landscape, and actually she and her wife Anya Packer have a podcast as part of the new iHeart Women's Sports lineup, Moms Who Puck. All right, where they talk about, yes, of course, hockey, but also motherhood, navigating through what that is. They've had Megan Duggan on the podcast before. Anya talked about, just what it has been like to go through IVF and that whole journey of starting a family, starting the Packer family. So definitely go check that out. And while I'm giving iHeart Women's Sports Radio, they don't give us live shows, live games yet there. We'll see if that ever grows. I'd love to hear women's sports just on the radio. Actually, iHeart did do that for the NWSL championship. So maybe we're not too far off there. But I do also want to give a shout out to the Women's Sports Network. Now, you can look that up on Fubo, Rachel. And at least last year, they had a partnership with the PWHL. They did not show live action games, but they were able to syndicate them or kind of reruns for sports. So re-airs. There you go. So if you
they're already on the schedule for women's.
There you go. Boom. So that's an opportunity there. We'll take what we can get. But Gil and Rachel, thank you so much. And coming soon, I should say. I know my Locked On listeners already know this, but we're going to continue this format, but on a Saturday where we will extend and expand our coverage of women's hockey. So make sure you stay tuned for that. We're going to give Rachel and Gil back a whole segment on Fridays. And there's just a lot of new formatting coming on Locked On NHL, which will include a dedicated weekly show to women's hockey that we hope will continue to grow from there. But Rachel and Gil, thank you so much for sharing this space with women's hockey fans. I think we have a little bit of an overlap to go, but we can't wait for an expanded show covering women's hockey.
Yeah, congratulations on that, and looking forward to it. And it's going to be great. A little more coverage and every week, and that's much needed in this landscape.
Indeed, indeed. Well, always a pleasure to catch up with y'all. And, we're coming up on puck drop, so there'll be lots of action to talk about, and also maybe some meetups from this crew here. So we'll see if we can make it happen.